This is the story of a man who hoaxed the biggest manhunt in British history. The man who pretended to be the Yorkshire Ripper.
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I warned you in March that I'd strike again.
20 years after the Yorkshire Ripper was jailed, the identity of the man who fooled the nation remains a mystery. But now, new evidence offers fresh clues to unmask the hoaxer.
I reckon your boys are letting you down, George. They can't be much good, can they?
Whoever wrote those letters was, in a sense, an accomplice to the Ripper.
They believed they were looking for a man with a Geordie accent.
I knew deep down it wasn't him. You know, one of the people that survived, and it wasn't him.
I think there's some questions that have to be answered, not guesses. Girls died.
If that were your mother laying in a grave, would you say let's forget about it?
Love? How much?
£5.
Yeah, there we go.
No one will ever forget the Yorkshire Ripper's reign of terror in the north of England in the 1970s and early 80s. But could he have been stopped earlier? When Yvonne Pearson's body was found on the 26th of March 1978 in Bradford, she became the 8th victim of the Yorkshire Ripper. Before her, Wilma McCann, Emily Jackson, Irene Richardson, Patricia Atkinson, Jane MacDonald, Jean Jordan, and Helen Ritker had all met their fate at his brutal hand. The biggest manhunt in British criminal history was underway. But after 3 years of killing, the police had failed to catch the Ripper. The north of England was living in fear.
The whole area spoke of nothing else but this killer. You forget that to live here for 5 years, women didn't walk the streets.
West Yorkshire Police had formed the Ripper Squad. From their HQ in Leeds, 300 officers whose sole job was to catch the killer. The man in charge, Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield. Second in command was Detective Superintendent Dick Holland. Despite following up thousands of leads, clues to the identity of the Ripper were few. His victims were random, his methods barbaric and frenzied. Holland's job was to run the incident room, the hub of the inquiry, where all the information on potential suspects was filed.
We had a system which was worked out for a manual filing system, a manual cross-checking system, based on manual written records, not computerized electronic records. Nothing was filed until it had been marked up with a green pen. Every stage in the inquiry had a different colour of pen.
When any piece of information came into the incident room, be it a name or anything, we had to make an index card out with what details we could, and it would be passed to an outside member of a team.
They were dependent upon a kind of shoebox filing system. They weren't using sophisticated computers, which were available. No human mind could have easily got round it. I suspect it's difficult enough when you've got computers working for you, given the scale that they were operating across.
You were bound to think, if I make a mistake with this, I can be filing the information that would lead us to the detection of the offender.
With 8 women dead, the inquiry drowning in paperwork, pressure on Oldfield and his team was mounting.
Clearly, there was a psychopathic killer on the loose, and the police were increasingly being shown to be nowhere near catching him.
There were clear signs of incompetence which dogged this whole inquiry, going back from the beginning right the way through to the end. A friend of mine, a reporter on the Yorkshire Post, was stopped in the streets of Morley, and the constable said to him, "Excuse me, sir, you don't know who the Yorkshire Ripper is, do you?"
it became increasingly more important that they stopped the killings and caught the perpetrator. And of course, the more it went on, the greater the pressure on people like George Oldfield to get a result.
All the time we thought we were going to catch him with that one and then subsequently with the next. It didn't work out that way.
On the 8th of March 1978, a letter was sent to George Oldfield. 1 month later, another addressed to the editor of the Daily Mirror in Manchester. Both postmarked Sunderland. Both claiming to be from the Ripper.
I am the Ripper. I've been dubbed a maniac by the press, but not by you. You call me clever, and I am.
The author signed himself Jack the Ripper. Talked of the murders in great detail and mentioned another previously unlinked crime.
Up to number 8 now. You say 7, but remember, Preston 75.
Oldfield was interested. The writer made reference to the unsolved murder of Joan Harrison, not previously attributed to the Yorkshire Ripper. Joan Harrison had been badly beaten, and her clothing left in a very similar style to some of the Ripper victims. Forensic analysis of saliva found on the envelope matched the rare blood group obtained from the semen sample taken from Joan Harrison's body. It was a rare B secretor blood type, found in only 6% of the population.
It seemed to have something that we could act on in, some semblance of the truth. So we acted on it.
Along with the forensic analysis, the letters were examined by handwriting expert Diane Simpson.
He's a loner. He is a creature of habit.
I was asked at one point, at the end of the assessment, if I thought this chap could be a killer. And my answer to that would be, I have no way of knowing that.
May 1978, another murder. Vera Millward, and just as the letters had predicted...
Next time try older one, I hope. Maybe Liverpool, or even Manchester.
Vera Millward was aged 40 when she died in Manchester. March 1979. George Oldfield receives another letter containing more information that seemingly could only have been known to the killer.
That bit about her being in hospital. Funny, the lady mentioned something about being in the same hospital before I stopped her holding ways.
Vera Millward had indeed been in Manchester Royal Infirmary only weeks before her death. April 79. Josephine Whittaker murdered in Halifax. This was followed in June 79 by a further delivery from Sunderland. But this time, not a letter, something far more audacious.
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George. But Lord, you are no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started.
1 year on from his first letter, the anonymous author from Sunderland had sent a tape recording of his voice. Speaking directly to George Oldfield, he taunted him about the failed attempts to catch him.
It was when we got letters and tapes and could compare the lot and put them together that we thought they were more interesting, and I think the best phrase is to say could be.
The tape was analysed by voice experts Stanley Ellis and Jack Windsor-Lewis.
A very marked individual kind of voice and a very limited type of dialect, so limited to a very small area of the country.
They pinpointed the accent to Sunderland, specifically the Castletown area.
I warned you in March that I'd strike again. Sorry it wasn't Bradford.
I did promise you that, but I couldn't get there. I mean, these sort of various characteristics are very repeated. They're very localized. Very few people talk like that.
I was prepared to accept that they were genuine, and I was prepared to act on it because there was so much in them that at least we ought to find out who had written them and why. And we hadn't a great deal else to go on.
Once they had decided that they had this rich treasure trove of clues from this writer who was telling them that he was the murderer, they couldn't depart from it. It was cast in stone. In other words, they put all their eggs in one basket.
Under intense pressure, Oldfield was stung into action and made his boldest move yet. He called a press conference on the 26th of June 1979 at Wakefield Police Station.
Nobody was prepared for the impact of that day. It was absolutely incredible. You could have heard the proverbial pin drop. We were so unprepared for the drama of hearing that voice. It was clearly designed to get at George Oldfield, and he looked dreadful.
I reckon your boys are letting you down, George.
We believed, because we were told, that we were listening to somebody who was on the streets killing women. We thought he was the Ripper.
If a man sends you a tape, you're in the middle of the biggest manhunt on the planet at that time, and this tape directly talks to you. You'd have to be well on your guard not to have that appealing to your ego and your vanity. Your boys are letting you down, George. You know, remarks like that are made to him. And Oldfield was totally seduced by it. He said, quote, "This is between me and him. This is not a matter for anyone else."
We know now that we are definitely looking for a man who originated in the northeast.
The gauntlet had been thrown down. The hunt for Wearside Jack was on. The manhunt had moved its focus to the northeast, code name Project R. The tape was played constantly on TV and radio. The letters were also released. Did anyone recognize either the handwriting or the voice? The response was huge.
Somebody you know?
Thousands phoned in with information. Sunderland was invaded by police, convinced this is where they'd catch the Ripper.
I think we affected every male in Sunderland, every sort of adult male from 18 to 55, I think it was the criteria.
Stanley and I were confident they'd catch him within a fortnight. But, of course, we were confident on the basis that they would look for a person who spoke this way, and they would take them, whoever they were, wherever they found them.
What picture have they now built up of Britain's most wanted man? It's agreed that his height is around 5 feet 8. He has a strong Wearside accent and is probably in his early 30s. His letters show a peculiar sloping style of handwriting, suggesting he's slightly brighter than average.
The police had taken what existing evidence they had, combined it with the voice and handwriting from Wearside to create the profile of the man they were convinced was the Ripper.
The moment you cross those two lines of inquiry, it is then impossible, if they are two separate people, it's impossible to catch either of them, because you're looking for someone who is, the description, the vital statistics for them is put together artificially, so you will always eliminate someone who doesn't speak with a Geordie accent.
I think the worst mistake that was made was when they actually published a confidential police bulletin which said disregard anybody who didn't have a Geordie accent.
I felt that the amount of investigation they had done in the northeast, they would have confronted, without knowing, the man who'd actually sent that tape, who would have had a perfect alibi, because he wasn't guilty of those murders, and that's why he'd have been eliminated.
The hunt in Wearside was proving fruitless. September 79, Barbara Leach was murdered in Bradford. Then Marguerite Walls in August 1980. But the police remained convinced the Ripper was the man who sent the letters and the tape from Sunderland.
We have the handwriting, which we can't ignore. We have the voice and the tape, which we can't ignore.
The pressure on them was immense. We were saying, when are you going to catch him? Why haven't you caught him? How many more women will die?
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me.
By the autumn of 1980, the Yorkshire Ripper had killed 12 women, and the biggest manhunt in British history was underway. The hunt for the Ripper was focused on Wearside. Detectives leading the investigation were convinced the Ripper was the man who had sent them 3 letters and a tape recording of his voice.
I warned you in March that I'd strike again. Sorry it wasn't Bradford.
But within the inquiry team, some were not convinced that the Ripper was the voice from Sunderland. In a report filed in the summer of 1979, a detective Laptew voiced his suspicions about a man who had been interviewed and eliminated a number of times. A lorry driver from Bradford, Peter William Sutcliffe.
There is no doubt at all that I received Laptew's report, and it pointed very strongly to Sutcliffe as a suspect. And on the strength of that, he should have been brought in. But he had been seen and eliminated on a number of occasions on many different points. And on the strength of that, I filed it. I should not have done so. I wish I hadn't, but you can't turn the clock back.
One of the reasons Sutcliffe had been eliminated was because he didn't have a Geordie accent. Elsewhere, other doubts began surfacing about the voice. Olive Smelt had survived an attack by the Ripper in 1975.
The man who spoke to me was a Yorkshireman. They really believed he was a Geordie. And I said, when you meet this man, if it's him who spoke to me, you will get a shock.
The police disregarded Olive Smelt's testimony. Another victim was also sure the Ripper didn't have a Geordie accent. Tracy Brown was 14 in 1975. She was walking home in Silsden, Yorkshire, when a man began chatting to her.
I could tell it was a Yorkshire accent, but it wasn't strong. It was quite a high-pitched voice, really. Then it was about 10 yards from the gateway, and I just happened to turn around, thank him for his company, and all of a sudden, bang, 5 times. And I fell into the side of a ditch. And I could hear him grunting, you know, with the force of the blows. And then as it happened, this car came down and disturbed him in the headlights of the car. But before he ran off, he threw me over a fence.
The police hadn't originally connected Tracy's attack to the Ripper, but she did after seeing his photo fit. George Oldfield visited her personally to play her the tape.
Even if you do get near, I'll probably top myself first.
And as soon as I listened to the tape, which was a couple of minutes long, not him. Definitely not him. So it's, and then he says, so you don't think it was him, you know, he couldn't have had a Geordie accent. He was trying to put words into my mouth, basically. So he couldn't have had a Geordie accent. I said, no. I said, I know what I heard. You know, I know who I spoke to, you know, for all that time. I said, no, I said, you know, definitely a Yorkshire man.
Then, in the summer of 1980, Keith Mount, a police officer in Sunderland, received a call to his station.
Phone went, and it was the person that I recognised as the tape maker on the phone. He stated that the tapes and the letters were a hoax, and that George shouldn't concentrate on them, ignore them, because they were hoaxes.
It's a hoax. No, listen, it's a hoax. Tell George, it was a joke. I'm not the Ripper.
I'm thinking, oh God, it's him, you know, and I'm trying to get a phone set up for recording, and I just got the very latter part, but everybody that listened to it, you know, my bosses, they all swore blind it was him.
Northumbria police passed this information on, but no further action was taken. In November of 1980, Jacqueline Hill became the Ripper's 13th victim. But within 6 weeks of her death, a miracle. A routine check on a car in the red light district of Sheffield on the 2nd of January 1981, and the Yorkshire Ripper was caught. Peter William Sutcliffe had been interviewed and eliminated by the police 9 times. He had been logged in the red light areas of Bradford and Leeds 46 times. He had previously been arrested in a red light area armed with a hammer. The biggest manhunt in British history was over.
And I can tell you that we are absolutely delighted with developments at this stage. Absolutely delighted.
First thing we asked, what's his accent? And they said Yorkshire. And people couldn't believe it.
It was like they'd won the FA Cup of all FA Cups.
Really delighted. George is delighted as well.
Part of that was an attempt by Gregory and those around him to almost surf over the wave of, well, wait a minute, he's not a Geordie.
Can you tell us whether he has a Geordie accent?
I cannot tell you that because I've not heard him speak.
They wanted to go right over the top of that one and go through, and of course the questions were not answered.
Sutcliffe was sentenced to life imprisonment for 13 murders. But in the furore of his trial, one man was forgotten. The author of the letters and tape from Wearside, the man now acknowledged to be a hoaxer.
That is the big mystery. What became of Wearside Jack? What became of the writer from Sunderland and the man who sent his voice? Because he didn't just do it once, he did it 4 times. He sent 3 letters and a tape. Then did he shut shop for the rest of time? Did he then forget all about it?
I believe this man to be guilty of a crime which is so wicked, is in its own way so evil. What they did, they gave Sutcliffe a license to murder, and he took that with full hands. For once that tape came out, it was only going to be by pure accident that he was caught. No other way at all.
Sentiments echoed by the families of Barbara Leach, Marguerite Walls, and Jacqueline Hill, the 3 women who died while the police were hunting a hoaxer.
That man has a lot to answer for. He's obviously got quite a few deaths on his conscience for the rest of his life.
Do you believe that if he hadn't sent that tape, Jacqueline could be alive today?
I'm sure of it. Definitely.
The inquiry team was fooled for more than 3 years. But should the detectives have spotted more quickly that it was the work of a hoaxer?
Bear in mind that there were reasons why it was correct, and there were some reasons why it wasn't. What would have been your reaction as a member of the public had we ignored it and had it turned out to be correct?
Can the hoax itself reveal anything about the identity of the perpetrator? If we examine the first 2 letters in detail, they mention key information which tricked the police into thinking they were from the Ripper.
In one of the letters, Vera Millwood is mentioned, and her visit to a hospital is mentioned. And the police said that had never been, publicised. Now, that's not true. It was, I think, mentioned in the Daily Mail and mentioned in the Manchester Evening News.
There were also clear parallels between the hoaxer and an infamous series of letters sent more than 100 years ago by a writer also claiming to be a serial killer, Jack the Ripper.
There are too many similarities. The tone, the rhythm, the cadence, the phrases gave me real fits.
That photo in the paper gives me fits.
They'll not catch me just yet.
I can't see himself being nicked just yet.
The 19th century letter writer uses a phrase about, my last job.
So I don't know when I will get back on the job.
The 19th century writer says, ha-ha, in his letter.
Hope you like the catchy tune at the end.
The thing one would have expected of the police force is that they would have been true crime buffs themselves.
It was from Wearside that the letters and tape were sent. 20 years on, the hoaxer has not been forgotten, particularly by one man determined to bring him to justice. Local journalist Patrick Lavelle.
The feeling among the people of Sunderland was that this was a big mystery. There was unanswered questions. There was a loose end in the whole story, that this man hadn't been identified. Because the finger of suspicion fell on so many men with a strong Wearside accent, it had an effect on lives. We had for 18 months the biggest police manhunt in Britain, concentrated on this one area. And now police say to us that they couldn't catch that man. I don't buy that.
For the past 2 years, Patrick Lavelle and the Sunderland Echo have conducted their own investigation into tracking down Wearside Jack.
When the Sunderland Echo carried out this investigation, they started publicising the hoax again. There was a great deal of interest from local people. There was 50 either names or people suggested as to who Wearside Jack could be.
Lavelle gradually narrowed the field down by comparing the suspects with a profile of the hoaxer he had drawn up.
We could eliminate 45 people on voice recognition only, but there was 5 we looked at where they shared at least 4 characteristics of the profile we had drawn up. Now, once we'd whittled it down to these 5 men, we had to track them down. I was personally able to get samples of handwriting from 2 of the men, and also, without them knowing why, got them to seal a couple of envelopes, which gives the forensic, the saliva from which you can get forensic evidence.
Patrick Lavelle's theory on the hoaxer takes the trail back to Berwick Road in Preston.
You say 7, but remember, Preston 75.
My personal belief is that the hoaxer was there at the time Joan Harrison was murdered and had sex with her beforehand. And there's a link between the hoaxer and the killer.
Convinced of this connection, Lavelle passed his information to Lancashire Police, the force still investigating Joan Harrison's unsolved murder.
One journalist has given us 5 names. They can't all be right. But they tend to look at one issue and then take a leap in logic to link it between Joan Harrison and the hoaxer. Nobody's given us any evidence. People have given us information. People have given us their own theories.
What could be the motive for the hoax? He was trying to switch blame for the murder of Joan Harrison onto the Ripper.
The only link there ever was a hoaxer saying so. But then, as I say, we know he's a hoaxer. There was nothing else to connect him. But what we can say is that all the suspects that have been suggested to us so far, we've been able to eliminate scientifically from the inquiry.
What I really want to do is convince the police that the information's worth looking at. If that means I need to get more information, then so be it. I'll get that information by whatever means.
20 years later, the identity of the hoaxer remains a mystery. But startling new evidence reveals fresh clues and reasons why the information has never before been revealed. Berwick Road in Preston, an unremarkable back street. Apart from being the location of the single biggest reason the police believe the hoax letters to be the work of the Ripper.
Up to number 8 now. You say 7. But remember, Preston 75.
Joan Harrison was a 26-year-old woman who lived in Preston. She was found dead in a derelict garage in the Frenchwood area of Preston one Sunday morning in November of 1975. She'd been badly beaten. There was severe injuries to her head and injuries to her body that suggest she'd been kicked or hit with an instrument or something like that.
A match was made between the saliva left on the envelopes with the semen taken from Harrison's body. They both belonged to a rare B secretor blood type. This convinced the police the letter writer and the murderer were the same man.
There's a strong suggestion that whoever was the last person to have intercourse with the girl Harrison at Preston could be related to our murderer.
The B secretor link had convinced police at the time that the letter writer had been involved in the murder of Joan Harrison. But recent advances in DNA forensic analysis tells a different story.
Forensic Science Service was asked to re-examine some of the items in the Joan Harrison case, and what the results showed was that we actually got mixtures of DNA profiles. If I took your DNA and took my DNA and then mixed our body fluids together and deposited them on an item, if we were to DNA test that, what we'd see is a mixed profile, your profile superimposed on mine. So in the Joan Harrison case, what the DNA tests show is that the seminal stains that have been put forward are actually mixtures, they're not single contributors.
We can now say that that B secretor may not be significant and may not be the murderer, because using DNA techniques, we've now identified at least 5 people whose semen was left on Joan Harrison's body. It doesn't sever the link on that case. It doesn't say it couldn't be the B secretor, but what I'm saying is there are many more possibilities. And of course we know that although it was mentioned in the letter from the hoaxer, it is in a letter from a hoaxer. And we know that everything else he said was untrue. So why should this piece be true?
So, if he wasn't involved in her murder, how could the hoaxer have known about Joan Harrison and Preston 75?
The police, I think, took the view that hadn't really, come into the public domain. Whereas actually, if you look in the Daily Mirror from 1975, the connection is there.
We didn't know until later that the details of Harrison at Preston had been made known in Yorkshire by some press releases which we were not privy to.
The hoaxer had also made another mistake.
Up to number 8 now. You say 7. But remember, Preston 75.
Within a couple of weeks of that arriving, they found the body of Yvonne Pearson, who had been killed before that letter had been sent. So the writer of the letter, if he was the Yorkshire Ripper, would have known that the number was actually, if you included Preston, 9. He was clearly telling the police that he read the newspapers.
That bit about her being in hospital.
He kept saying, that bit about this, that bit about me killing myself. No chance. That bit means what I have just read.
Just along the coast are the shipyards of North Shields, which provide the backdrop to one of the most incredible theories about the identity of the hoaxer. Today the docks are busy, but 20 years ago the quayside was virtually deserted. A fisherman's mission, offering a canteen for dock workers, ship hands and lorry drivers. Olive Curry worked here 20 years ago and remembers 2 customers in particular.
Well, it was 1978. Working part-time here. No work, nothing. The place very, very quiet. And these 2 men would come in 4 o'clock in the afternoon, always late in the afternoon. Sat there or there near the counter. They had scones or pie, 2 lots of tea or coffee, whatever.
There you are, Peg. There's your scones.
They talked and they appeared to be the best of friends. The little one never came to the counter. Never. Couldn't help but look at the 2 of them. They both sat at the same corner. I didn't know his name then, but it was Peter Sutcliffe. I know now it was him, of course, when he was arrested. But I couldn't believe it, not him. Not that nice young man. Because by this time, 4 o'clock, I would come out into the canteen to do the tables and things. And that's when he talked. The little one, the little tramp. Peter, very good-looking young man, very nice.
So a nice place you got here, love.
Why, we do our best. He told me about his house, his wife, Sonia, being a teacher.
You work here full-time, do you?
No.
But you're...
But everything he said, he turned to the little one. Isn't that right, Carl? Where are you from?
From Bradford, me, I call.
And is he from Bradford as well?
No, it's Sunderland, that you call.
Oh, so you're a Mackham then. That's what we call them.
Is it?
So what do you do?
Lorry drivers, isn't that right?
All right, you're going back down to Bradford then tonight?
Yeah, we'll set off in about an hour, love you.
All right, well. Have a safe journey, lads.
Oh, well, thanks, love.
Sutcliffe and his friend were regular visitors to the canteen in the summer of '78, and eventually Olive heard the other man speak when he came in alone.
And I said, where is he? Meaning, Peter, I didn't know his name. And what he said was, he's gone to the toilet, but it was the way he said it. He'd put his hand over here, like that one here. He's gone to the toilet. But I heard the lisp, very plain.
It was only when Sutcliffe was caught that Olive recognized the voice of his Geordie friend as the voice of the hoaxer.
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me.
I didn't guess at the time when I heard the things. But when Peter was arrested, then I pinpointed the voice. It was his. Yes, it was his voice on the tapes.
Support for Olive's story comes from an unlikely source. Handwriting expert Diane Simpson, who examined the original hoax letters. She's visited Peter Sutcliffe many times in Broadmoor over the past few years.
Peter Sutcliffe that I got to know is very good at giving a lot of information in which he's buried some truth in the middle. I asked him about it. He said I was never there. I was interested to discover that he had been delivering in the area. He'd conveniently obviously forgotten when he mentioned it to me. When he was questioned by a number of police officers on the subject of the letters, among other things, one of his remarks was they may try, maybe look, in a mission in North Shields.
Somehow Peter got that man to make the tapes. And that took the heat off him. He was able to kill 3 more girls because of it. And I don't think the little one should be allowed to go free.
Not everyone is persuaded by the theory that the hoaxer was Sutcliffe's accomplice.
I know the associate of Peter Sutcliffe theories can be quite seductive. He certainly has never indicated at any time since his arrest that he did not act other than entirely alone.
Virtually all offenders would be very, very cautious about any hint of themselves being fed into the inquiry.
I don't believe he was an accomplice of Sutcliffe. I think clearly he had some knowledge of the case, which I understand could have been picked up from newspapers and elsewhere. Psychologically, I think once he got the publicity and once he realised the response he was getting, it became almost a personal thing with himself and George Oldfield.
There is support for the theory that the hoaxer acted entirely alone and gathered all his information from newspapers.
He was somebody who was looking for some reflected attention to see himself being written about in various contexts and situations, to see his name in the newspapers, to feel that the police were trying to work out who he was. And then that was really part of why he put himself into the process. If he was a loner, that would explain everything, because no one would have, been able to identify his voice or his writing, but likewise, he wouldn't have been able to spill the beans to anyone.
20 years on, there are still conflicting theories about the hoaxer's identity. But amongst all the speculation, one possibility above all emerges as the most terrifying, because it points to someone at the very heart of the investigation. To carry out the hoax, the perpetrator needed access to privileged information, motive, and opportunity. All things quite possible for a serving police officer.
Thanks, sir.
There was a body of opinion that this was probably a police officer, or someone very close to a police officer, who had a deep and abiding grudge towards Oldfield and perhaps other elements of the inquiry as well.
If it was a policeman, that policeman stood by and watched while the officers pitifully, without computers, went running after this person. That policeman stood by and watched.
I'm not quite sure when I'll strike again. But it will be definitely sometime this year.
I know that at least 2 serving police officers who are still alive were strong contenders. Now, can you imagine the reaction of this country if the full implications of that were reminded to them of what had occurred because of the actions of a police officer who, far from doing what is his sworn duty to apprehend, had actually assisted.
At the height of the Ripper hunt, there was a secret internal police investigation into the allegations that the letter writer was a police officer.
We got the forensic scientists to check every suspect police officer. We found one that was pretty much like him. We checked the handwriting and the format of the letters, and this particular police officer was eliminated.
You always get the suggestion that the only person that really could fool the police like this is a police officer because of his inside knowledge. And I suppose to that extent it's true. A police officer would be in a very powerful position to know exactly how the police mind and machine works. It's a very easy suggestion to make, but without any evidence, I would discount it, quite honestly.
It's very unlikely that it would be a police officer because it doesn't either have the cynical and very detailed, sort of sarcastic teasing that might have been expected if it was done as part of a joking culture, nor does it have the very intense, vicious quality that would have been expected if it was a police officer who was very angry with the investigation.
I believe that a serving officer made that tape. If not a serving officer, someone who was a close friend of a serving officer, who the serving officer must have given the information to. And that belief is held to this day not only by me, but by senior police officers who were involved in this inquiry.
The lack of hard evidence has consistently hampered the hunt for Wearside Jack. But can modern technology offer new clues to his identity? Using the latest audio technology, the hoaxer's tape has been re-examined for this program by the country's leading voice analyst.
Well, it's quite clear that the whole exercise has been well rehearsed in the sense that the person, the hoaxer, is obviously reading from a prepared text.
But it will be definitely sometime this year, maybe September, October.
At the end of the message, we have these little taunts to George Oldfield.
Hope you like the catchy tune at the end.
They're not part of the same recording. They've been added as afterthoughts. So he's switched the machine off, thought of a taunt to add, added it. Switched the machine off again, added another one, and so on. So it's been made in a series of blocks, if you like. In terms of the background noise, what seems to be singularly lacking on the tape is ambient noise, traffic noise, that sort of thing.
Dr. French has been able to age the voice artificially, so we can hear what the hoaxer might sound like 20 years on.
If we were to make the assumption that the person was in their early or mid-30s at the time when the recording was made, if they followed the general trend, this is what their voice might sound like today.
I'm Jack. I see you are still having no luck catching me. I have the greatest respect for you, George, but Lord, you are no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started.
Wearside Jack is still a free man, possibly even still living in the Castletown area of Sunderland. He has not been forgotten by the people who live here, but are the police still hunting him?
We should ask why he hasn't been pursued most vigorously since the trial of Peter Sutcliffe. They said at the time, we are continuing inquiries. They weren't. It was wound down. There was one sergeant and a constable in charge of it. And there isn't even that now, and there hasn't been for many, many years. They don't want to catch that man. A, because it will be a rerun of this appalling cock-up, and B, because it might be a policeman.
Questions remain unanswered. Questions we ask the West Yorkshire Police Force. Are they still actively pursuing the hoaxer? Where are the original letters, and particularly the original tape?
If you were to go to Wakefield and ask for access to this material, it won't be given to you. You'll probably be told it doesn't exist. I will tell you that a senior source before coming on this program of yours that I spoke to said to me, look, the tape exists, the letters exist. I hold them in my hand 9 months ago. Now, you'll be told, oh, we don't know where they are. They're in the exhibits cage at Wakefield this afternoon as we talk now.
Your sources are close to West Yorkshire Police?
Yes.
West Yorkshire Police refused to be interviewed, so we don't know if the letters and tape have been subjected to a modern forensic DNA analysis, which could reveal if he were an existing offender or a police officer. The officer in charge of the case gave this written statement.
I do not intend to answer in detail the specific points raised. As a matter of policy, West Yorkshire Police will investigate any person who is alleged to be the author of the letters and tape, providing there is some accompanying evidence.
I think we have a right to know more about, what happened with the investigation into Wearside Jack. The police force have got to keep talking to us about these things. They can't just, rub out history. They can't forget all this happened. They are our police force, and they are accountable to us.
Justice is important, and I think because he had such an important effect, possibly even leading to further women being killed, then if there's an opportunity, a chance, the slightest chance, to find out his identity, even if he isn't still alive, then I think we've got to make that effort.
We know so much, and yet Wearside Jack remains at large. Was he an accomplice to the Ripper? A loner acting on his own? A serving police officer? Or a murderer? For the hoax alone, he could be sentenced to life imprisonment, but whether he will ever stand trial remains to be seen. The truth, like Wearside Jack, is yet to be discovered.
It's been nice chatting to you, George. Yours, Jack the Ripper.
There is a good chance he's still in our midst, and I think if he's still in our midst, he's guilty of one hell of a crime. And he should be brought to book.
The fact that such a man can walk around with that on his conscience, knowing that he had deliberately tried to mislead a police investigation about the killing of women, is unacceptable.
I think a message has to go out that people who take such actions, that those girls are not forgotten. Whenever thought be forgotten.